Welcome to True Crime and Wine Time. I'm Terry.
And I'm Llama.
Tonight, we are uncorking the truth behind one of the darkest crimes and breaking it down together with you.
One case, one conversation, and one or maybe two glasses of wine to take the edge off. It's time to get comfortable and double check those locks before we get started.
So let's take a sip and dive in.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Wine Time. It's just Llama tonight. That's right. The lovely Terry True Crime could not be with us tonight. I know her and I are just rotating back and forth, but that's okay. The show must go on, whether it's with me or with it's just her. We're making it happen because we are almost done with this Robert Hansen nonsense. So hope everyone's having a happy Tuesday. I know I've had a pretty good day. The weather was nice here. It felt like spring. Oh, it's so nice to not be in winter mode anymore. I feel like it's happening. It's happening. Hello, Pam. Hello. Good evening to you. That's right. Please, before we begin, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss when we go live or drop an episode. And it lets everyone else know that we're live right now and that they should probably come hear this story that is infuriating. Infuriating. Hello, Lainey. Hello. Hope you're doing well. And Teresia, lovely to see you. I love it. Everybody gather on in. We're on the couch. I hope you got your wine and stuff because you're going to need it. Now, you can also become a member of our YouTube channel with all sorts of exclusive perks. All you got to do is just click the join button and pick whichever tier works best for you. And if you're listening to this as a pod, please download and leave a rating or review or whatever the platform you're using asks you to do, as it helps our little pod get noticed. Also, speaking of getting noticed, the lovely Terry True Crime informed me that for our podcast, apparently we have friends in Australia who have been listening to our Robert Hansen story, and that's really awesome. So hello, Aussie friends. Welcome. It's a crazy story indeed. Hello, Buff. Hello. I know you could help ruin this show too. Well, you know what? Australia doesn't seem to think we're too hard to listen to. Anyway. So tonight is part 11 of our Frozen Fear, the Butcher Baker of Alaska series, where we are diving deep into infamous serial killer Robert Hansen, his endless number of victims who we refuse to let be forgotten, and how all of it could have been stopped numerous times. And it is of our opinion that the state of Alaska has a lot of blood on their hands, and we are here to shine a light on all of it. So warning, there will be rants and there will be cursey words. I can pretty much promise you that. Now, I think that this story, the reason why we chose to extend it is because generally when you hear the story about Robert Hansen, you hear about his 17 murder victims. It makes it sound like everything was taking place in the 80s. And then you find out that there was a whole lot of shit going on in the 70s and that he probably just should have been locked up the whole time, but depended on words of respectable people or parole officers being like, well, he has a job and a family. Burp, burp, burp. And so then a bunch of women die because of it. And so that's why we extended this story, because there's really a lot more to it than what I was led to believe, honestly. So I can't wait. You can rant at the wall. She does. Buffy does. Hello. Welcome. Well, for the show tonight, I told you I was going to buy a bottle of vodka for this whole series, and I have just enough left for tonight and tomorrow. So I am drinking my Svedka, Sveda, with 7-Up and orange juice. So that's going to take me to a very good place tonight. Now, with that, let's just go right ahead and get into tonight's story with a brief little recap. So, we've watched the mask of sanity slowly slip from the face of Robert Hansen. We saw we saw how a stuttering, mild-mannered baker from Old Harbor Road managed to live a double life for over a decade. He was a pillar of the community by day and a calculated predator of the Alaskan bush by night. Now, the investigation reached its boiling point with the recovery of the aviation death map, featuring 24 chilling X marks. And we witnessed the incredible resilience of Cindy Paulson, the teenager who broke the cycle of violence by rolling out of a car, and her subsequent transformation from a strung out street kid to a skookum, that's our new Alaskan word we've learned, star witness, protected by a Christian safe house. In this final chapter, we go beyond the arrest. We're heading back into the interrogation room to hear the words that the world thought it would never hear. And I am going to have some rants just to let you know. Oh my. Well, still no Vita. Yeah, no Vita tequila here. No. Yes, I think it will be prepared because honestly, this whole confession, that's what we're going to hear tonight, is annoying as shit. So prepare yourselves, everybody. Now, the legal fortress Robert Hansen had built around himself was beginning to implode, and his defense was rapidly crumbling under the weight of forensic reality. Hansen's attorneys, Fred Dewey and Joe Evans, had gone to bat for him. And they hadn't just performed a mechanical legal defense, they genuinely believed in the Meek Baker. And if you're wondering, because I know you probably are, I believe that they are court appointed. He did not pay for these lawyers. Now, they had publicly called the charges ridiculous and even defended him against murder rumors before he was even charged. So convinced were they of his innocence. And it wasn't like they really did think that. It wasn't, all defense lawyers are going to be like, my client denies doing those things, as a defense attorney should. It's exactly what you do. But as you'll learn later on, they were very surprised to find out who their client was. But as the troopers laid out the evidence, the jewelry in the attic, the ballistics from the Mini 14, and the 24 X marks, the lawyers were starting to realize the truth. Like the neighbors, the churchgoers, and the insurance agents before them, they too had been victims of Hansen's mini mask. He hadn't just lied to the police. He had weaponized his own legal team's trust to facilitate his escape. And listen, he's been through this system numerous times now, with basically he'd be sent to prison or it'd be negotiated. He'd get out in 6 months or be let off completely. So why would he want to show all of his cards when he had all the reason to be like, I don't have to say all the things. It's fine. Now, the final crushing blow came from the friends who had provided his alibi. For months, the word of these well-respected men had been the primary reason Cindy Paulson's testimony was questioned. They were the shield that allowed Hansen to claim he was just having pizzas and beers while Cindy was chained to a post in his basement. Oh, we know the Johns, right? That's their names, the Johns. Not a fan of them. Hello, Kelly. Hello. Welcome. Hi, Lady in Gray. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. However, when the state troopers brought these men into the interrogation room, the loyalty vanished. Faced with the physical proof of a serial killer's trophies, the friends broke. They confessed that they had lied to the authorities about Hansen's whereabouts on the night of June 13th. Now, while Hansen was finally exposed, the men who paved his way to freedom numerous times, the ones who lied to protect a predator and discredit a traumatized 17-year-old, faced No legal consequences. And it wasn't the first time or the first girl that the Johns gave alibis for Robert. I have my suspicions about them. They are not good people. And it kind of pisses me off that they weren't charged with anything: obstruction of justice, lying to the police, nothing. But then again, we are talking about Alaska, and they're like, the only reason why any of this is happening is because they couldn't turn their head anymore, like they had done for the last 13 years. Because otherwise, I feel like they probably would have. Now, as I said, there's no record of these friends ever being charged with obstruction of justice or perjury. They provided the cover that allowed a killer to remain at large. And when the truth became too ugly to ignore, they simply walked away back into their respectable lives, leaving the wreckage of Hansen's victims behind him. Now, Robert Hansen was now truly alone. No alibi, no reputation, and no way out. The meek baker was gone, and the butcher was all that remained. Oh, gosh, those guys. I hate those guys so much. Now, on February 16th, 1984, the call from District Attorney Frank Rothschild to Sergeant Flothe carried an unmistakable tone of victory. Hansen's attorney, Fred Dewey, said Hansen has had a change of heart and wanted to clear the decks. He was ready to talk, but he wanted to do it on his own terms after a consultation with his priest and within the secure confines of the district attorney's office, where he wouldn't have to see the recording equipment that would capture his downfall. I don't see why talking to a priest is going to help him out any, because it didn't. And it didn't change how he talked about things either. I think that this is just Hansen's last attempt to exert control, because as we've learned about him, like, that's his most important thing is being in control and, overpowering the situation. So of course he's going to do it in these final moments. Now, as is common with high stakes confession, the meek baker got cold feet. Of course he did. On February 17th, the interview was abruptly postponed. Hansen wanted the weekend to think it over. Like, why? Do you really need that? So Rothschild and Flothe spent the interim sharpening their leverage. They knew Hansen was looking for a deal, but they weren't interested in half-truths. Flothe's strategy, suggested by investigator Walter Gilmore, was blunt. Quote, if he balks, tell him that come summer, we'll charge him with murder every time we dig up another body. So the deal was struck not out of a sudden onset of conscience. No, but instead out of a predator's calculated fear. On the morning of his 12-hour marathon confession, Robert Hansen presented a list of demands that revealed a man terrified of the very world he had spent a decade terrorizing. And this is, you guys are just going to be like, oh my God, the audacity of some of these things that he says. Excuse me. Let's see. So Hansen said he would plead guilty to the 4 murders the state could already prove with forensic certainty. That being Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Paula Goulding, and the still unidentified Eklutna Annie. In exchange for the locations of his other victims and a guide to the X marks on his map, Hansen demanded 2 things: a total media blackout and a permanent transfer to a federal prison outside of Alaska. The man who had spent years hunting women in the wilderness was now the one who felt hunted. Oh, poor Robert. Oh no, poor Bob. Are people going to be mean to you and mad at you? You're such a stand-up guy, though. Hansen's primary motivation for the plea was a desperate, paranoid attempt to protect his family and himself. He was convinced that many of his victims, whom he primarily targeted from the avenue, were connected to organized crime, specifically motorcycle gangs like the brothers. Quote, they're the girlfriends and so forth of the motorcycle gangs. His family is going to disappear. My little daughter is just not going to come home. She might show up 3 years later as some animal digs her out of Nick River someplace. That's what he said. Now, I have the utmost listen, his wife and kids have nothing to do with anything, and I do think they should be protected at all costs, and you shouldn't retaliate against somebody's family at all. But for him to be like, well, what about my daughter? What if this happens to her? With like zero regards that literally every single woman was somebody's daughter. Just rubs me the wrong way. Like, how dare you? In a moment of chilling self-awareness, Hansen admitted, quote, I know there's nothing they can do to me and that I don't deserve. Yet he weaponized the safety of his wife, Darla, and their children to secure his deal. He demanded that the state provide a secure apartment for Darla while she prepared to flee Alaska forever. And as part of the bargain, Hansen would have to get into a helicopter with Sergeant Flothe and Sergeant Gallion to point out the grave sites from the air, a macabre reenactment of his hunting trips. God, I would not want to be on that helicopter. Ooh, talk about creepy. Don't love it. Hi, Laura. Hope you're doing well. He is scum. He is. To just say that, like, is gross. That means he knows how wrong it was. I know, the audacity, right? Hi, Spetty. Hope you're doing well tonight, babe. Now, on the morning of February 22nd, 1984, the state's legal heavyweights, Victor Crumb, yes, you heard that name correctly, Harry Potter fans, Victor Crumb, and Frank Rothschild prepared to sit across from Robert Hansen for a marathon session that would last 12 grueling hours over 2 days. Now, the prosecution wasn't walking into this blind. Thanks to consultations with the FBI's behavioral experts, they knew exactly how a man like Hansen operated. Serial killers often treat confessions like a final business transaction. They'll admit to the crimes they know the police can prove and then abruptly stop, hoping to keep a few trophies for themselves. And that's usually how it goes, unless you got somebody with a really, really wild ego. But even then, they're usually filled with half-truths. Now, ADA Rothschild says, quote, if he was able to walk away not having confessed to other cases, then he would walk away a winner and would have beaten the system again. He's not wrong. So to break this cycle, Rothschild took on a difficult role as the empathetic listener. No matter how stomach-turning Hansen's descriptions became, the stalking, the terrorizing, the final moments in the bush, Rothschild would talk with and remain entirely neutral with him. And I don't know how people do that, in especially cases like these, because Robert Hansen says some shit that I would have called him out on for sure and been like, cut the bullshit, sir. Okay? No. And that's why I'm not one of these people at all. Now, at exactly 8:46 a.m., the room went quiet as the official interview was initiated. Present were Sergeant Flothe and Hogsfin, Lieutenant Gent, Trooper von Klassen, and the full legal teams for both sides. And the session began with the formal reading of the Agreement of Understanding. It laid out the immunity, the transfer request, and the waiver of rights. Hansen sat there with his lawyers, Dewey and Evans, listening to the legal definitions of his own surrender. He knew the police had his maps, and he knew that they had his guns, and he knew they had trashed his alibis. He really had no choice at this point. And honestly, I think he just didn't really want the media at all around, which is interesting, but that's the only reason he did this, in my opinion. Now, the 12-hour session began with the case that finally brought the meek baker to his knees, Cindy Paulson. Robert Hansen leaned into the microphone and began to minimize pretty much everything, to the surprise of none of us, because of course he did. Even while admitting to the crimes of kidnapping and rape, he attempted to edit the narrative to make himself appear less predatory. Because don't forget, guys, he is a really nice guy, okay? They're just misunderstandings. They're just deals that go wrong. I'm a family person. I'm a baker. I'm not a bad guy. Not me. As I'm sitting here, trying to confess to 4 murders and horrible, horrible atrocities. I'm not that bad, guys. So he flatly contradicted Cindy's terrifying account of the abduction. While she remembered a man sticking a .357 Magnum to her head in the car, Hansen claimed he only brought the gun out once they were safely inside the home. Just so you guys get that right, he only brought it out when they were inside. He would never do that in the car to get them in the car like he did with so many other women already. So he would never do that. In his mind, this made the act somehow less violent, like it was some mere domestic disagreement rather than a life-threatening abduction. And I think the most chilling part of his initial confession was Hansen's explanation for why he was taking Cindy to the airport to fly her into the wilderness. To the troopers, this was the precursor to a murder. And I agree, it was exactly to take her out there to murder her. It was the same pattern he had used for Sherry Morrow and Joanna Messina. But Hansen said he just wanted more time with her. That's all, guys. I was just going to, take her handcuffed. I know I kidnapped her. I know I raped her. I know that I have her in handcuffs and I'm about to take on the plane. But it's just because I wanted to spend more time with her. Not because I wanted to murder her. Like, how did he think this was going to make him sound better? I don't understand. What a guy. I know, right? What a swell guy. Love it. So he painted himself as a lonely man who simply wanted companionship. Even though he had a wife. And ignoring the fact that his companion was a terrified 17-year-old girl. Remember, he's 44 years old at this time. She's 17 years old, who had been chained to a post in his basement. But he's not a monster, guys. Now, D.A. Rothschild and Sergeant Flothy sat in silence, playing the roles perfectly. They didn't challenge his more time narrative, and they knew that if they caught him a liar now, the faucet of information would turn off. And they're right. And that's why I'm not an investigator or a prosecutor at all. Because I would have been like, you're lying. So they let him believe they were buying his story, that he was just a misunderstood man who just got carried away, as men do. Ridiculous. And by letting Hansen minimize the Cindy Paulson case, they were lulling him into a false sense of security, right? They were waiting for him to get comfortable enough to talk about the women who hadn't escaped, the ones who didn't get more time, but instead got a shallow grave. Now, as the confession went on, a new, even more disturbing layer of Robert Hansen's psychology emerged. Hansen revealed to Frank Rothschild that he had grown tired of the logistical difficulties of flying women into the bush. I know, gosh, why is that got to be so hard and complicated? So the risk of whether mechanical failure or a victim escaping in the vast wilderness were weighing on him. Oh, poor guy. His solution was what he chillingly dubbed his, quote, summer project. And I'm going to try my best not to put in my thoughts too right away. And I want to see what you guys actually think his summer project was here. He said he wanted to bring his fantasies home, but to turn his house into a private dungeon, he needed his family out of the way. So for over a year, Hansen meticulously conspired to clear the house. He had eventually convinced his wife Darla and their children to take a massive multi-week trip to Europe to visit his relatives in Denmark and in other parts of the lower 48. While his family was half a world away exploring their heritage, Robert Hansen was back in Anchorage, transforming their family home into a house of horrors. What a great guy. Just a great family man. Hansen's evolution took a bizarre turn into the world of traditional dating. He placed an advertisement in the Anchorage Daily News under the Sunday Singles column. He told investigators he was looking for a sincere, honest attachment, someone who wasn't from the Avenue. And that makes no sense. I'm sorry, I don't know how you go from getting dancers and sex workers and murdering them, and now you're putting an ad in there because you want to date somebody over the summer while your family's away. This part makes no sense, by the way. So his ad, which ran twice in the month before Darla left, read like a typical outdoorsman's plea for companionship. Adventurous male, 42, 5'11", 165 pounds, looking for a lady proud to be a woman, to share sincere, honest attachment. Must like to dance and enjoy social life. Oh gosh, I just must like to dance. And I just put that together that he normally gets dancers. I wonder, he's not talking about that kind of dancing, I don't think. And enjoy social life. Willing to put on jeans. Join me in finding what's around the next bend over the next hill. Enjoy flying, own plane, beach combing, fishing, camping. Life is beautiful, much fuller if shared. Knowing what we know now about Hansen, that doesn't sound great at all. But to the readers of the Sunday paper, it was the ad of a lonely pilot. To the troopers sitting in the interrogation room, it was a predator casting a new kind of net. Hansen reasoned that if he could control the setting, he believed he could control his impulses. But as Cindy's escape proved, the summer project was destined to end in the same violence that had defined his life for 13 years. I mean, how could it not? Hansen wasn't looking for a partner to share what's around the next bend. He was looking for a victim he could keep within reach of his own basement. And that's what I think. I think that's what I think as well. That he was hoping to get somebody. He wasn't trying to date anybody. He was trying to have a sex slave in his house for the summer, if you ask me. So Robert Hansen's Sunday Singles ad had actually worked. And one of the women who answered it was an employee of the Alaska State Troopers. Yeah. On June 8th, 1983, this woman walked into the house on Old Harbor Road for a first date. Hansen, playing the role of the adventurous male from his ad, and gave her the grand tour. He took her down to the basement, the very room that would soon become a dungeon, and showed off his museum of death, the stuffed trophies and hunting kills lining the wall, which women love. I'm sure some women love that. I'm not one of those, but it's a weird first date is all I'm saying. Look at my walrus tusk. Hansen admitted that his goal for the evening was to have sex with her on his large bearskin rug. But this respectable woman, who was not that kind of woman, turned him down. It was a first date and she wasn't interested. To her, it was, sorry, pardon me. I still have a lingering cough and I do apologize for that. To her, it was just a disappointing evening with a socially awkward baker. She walked out of that house, up the stairs, and back to her life, completely unaware that she had just stood in the kill zone of a serial predator. Now, the rejection from a respectable woman seemingly snapped something in Hansen. His attempt at a sincere attachment had failed, and his family was halfway across the globe. The house was empty, the bare rug was waiting, and his frustration was boiling over. 5 days later, on June 13th, Hansen went back to what he knew. He didn't look for a Sunday single anymore. No, he went to the avenue and found Cindy Paulson. The same bare rug where a trooper employee had politely declined a sexual encounter was the same spot where, less than a week later, Cindy Paulson was handcuffed, chained to a post, and raped. And Hansen told the prosecutors that he respected the women who answered his ads because they weren't prostitutes. In his warped moral compass, their respectability acted as a shield. But when he couldn't get what he wanted through the personal section, he reverted to his predatory nature. Cindy Paulson wasn't just a victim of Robert Hansen. She was the victim of his failed attempt to be a normal man. And I just want to pause here on that because this is his story. This is what him saying his intentions were. And I think he is a liar who lies to try to make himself sound like a normal person. Oh, I just put that in there to I just wanted to date somebody. Well, it doesn't make any sense knowing what we know about Robert. And had that woman, this respectable woman, according to him, agreed to have slept with him on that bearskin rug, in his moral dichotomy, would make her a whore. He's already said that before. So he probably would have killed her as well. I think he's lying about this whole thing and that he was just felt he could get away with it. I don't believe him for a second. I was just like, oh, I just wanted to date. Because what was he going to do? Start dating somebody and then his family come back in a couple of months? Well, then what do you do with the woman you've been dating for a few months? You don't want your super religious wife to be finding out that you're in a relationship. His only choice would be to kill her. In Robert's world, there are other choices, but according to Robert, there's none. So we can only go with what he has to say about that. Oh, God, if it was current, oh, yikes. No, thank you. Yes. Swipe left, please, and thank you. Now, okay. So next, we have this quote. Quote, I didn't start to hate all women. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say I started to fall in love with every one of them. Every one of them became so precious to me because I wanted their friendship. I wanted them to like me so much. On top of the things that have happened, I'm not saying that I hate all women. I don't. Quite to the contrary, I guess in my own mind, what I'm classifying is a good woman, not a prostitute. I do everything in my power, anyway, in any way, shape, or form, to do anything for her and to see that no harm ever came to her. But I guess prostitutes are women I'm putting down as lower than myself. I don't know if I'm making sense or not. And, when this started to happen, when it happened the first time at Eklutna, I went home and was literally sick to my stomach. As a matter of fact, I was sick out there to my stomach. I can remember I sat and cried. I knew what I did was totally wrong. It had come so close to happening before with Patty Roberts. So going way back into 71 there. But also, yeah, I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all, Robert. But sure, that's just him being like, I'm a lover. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm actually a huge romantic. So I'm a person, right? Who says that stuff? Nobody says that stuff. Hello, Wicked Banshee. Hello, good evening. Good evening. Excuse me. So it said he had finished that with, it had come so close to happening before with Patty Roberts. The daughter of the trooper, Frank Rothschild asked. Right. There were other girls there. It comes so close to happening, but it hadn't. That does protest too much. Because they hadn't tried to run? Vikram asked. Right. As long as they didn't run away, things went as I controlled it. I guess I wanted to control things. It made me feel masculine or powerful or in control of my life. And as long as things went fine, that was it. But this time it went too far. My gosh, I can remember I never even drove downtown, I think, for 6 months. I can remember driving downtown and seeing a prostitute down there, and my gosh, my whole body just tightened up. I didn't even want to go close to one. Do you guys believe him? I don't believe him. As the tapes rolled, Hansen detailed the 1980 murder of Iklutna Annie, not as a premeditated hunt, but more as a series of escalations where he casts himself as a man merely trying to maintain order, you guys, okay? He said she was his first kill, but didn't know her name. He remembered her clothes, blue jeans, a sweater, and a brown leather jacket, and a vague belief that she might have been from Kodiak. To the world, she was a human being, but to Hansen, she was just as disposable as his pastry wrappers. I mean, pretty much, right? And I do not believe for 1 second this is his first kill. Do you guys? Do you guys think that Alukna is his first kill? I don't think so. He couldn't remember if she was a dancer or a sex worker, but he admitted to picking her up downtown under the guise of taking her to his home in Muldoon. The moment the pickup truck passed the Muldoon Road exit, the meager baker vanished. When she realized they were heading into the wilderness and demanded to go back, Hansen's need for control took over. He claimed he tried to calm her by pulling out his gun, saying, quote, I just pointed the gun and I tell her, I says, no, look, if you do exactly what I tell you and don't give me any problem whatsoever, there's going to be you won't get hurt in any way, shape, or form, because I know if a gun is being pointed to me, I'm not scared or worried that I'm going to be hurt, because that totally calms people down. Right? He is a liar. Yeah, I don't think she's his first at all. The narrative then took a surreal turn as Hansen described his truck getting stuck in a muddy swamp near Iklutna Lake. In a bizarre display of the power dynamic he held, he actually convinced his terrified captive to help him maneuver the vehicle back onto tractable ground. But the moment the truck was free, the truce ended. But as soon as Hansen started to drive away, she did the one thing Hansen said triggered his violence. She ran. Hansen chased her through the bush, catching her by the hair and tripping her to the ground. He claimed she pulled a knife from her purse, a common tactic Hansen used to justify his retaliation. As he pinned her face down into the Alaskan dirt, the woman's intuition was perfect. While Hansen continued to gaslight her, falsely claiming he wouldn't harm her, She screamed the truth into the mud. You're going to kill me. And he ended her life with a single brutal thrust of a black-handled buck knife into her back. Hansen said in his confession that this nameless woman is the first person he ever killed. Quote, "It happened the first time there, and I went home. I was literally sick to my stomach," he said. As a matter of fact, I was sick out there to my stomach. To which I say, the fuck he was, okay? I do not believe this for 1 second. This is him doing what he does best, sticking to his meek, I'm a meek little baker. I'm not a bad guy. I'm just a Midwest guy. Do. I'm not the bad guy, blah, 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 that we've seen him do a million times already. I mean, he is an avid hunter. Now, I'm not saying all hunters can hunt people. That is not what I'm saying here, just to clarify. But this man has killed and dressed how many animals? All right. He has taken life. And quite frankly, he does not see these women as human beings at all. So it's really no different to him. And yet, he's so torn up, you guys. He's so remorseful of what he did. He's sick to his stomach. He's not this kind of person. And then he goes and does the same thing 16 more times. So it doesn't make any sense to me at all. This whole, she was my first and I didn't mean to. I would never. Doesn't make sense. And he tries to say as well that Lukna Annie's his first kill. And the problem is, as long as they didn't run away, he didn't hurt them. And you're telling me that of all the women before Lukna Annie, that she was the first to try to run, to try to escape, to try to not cooperate? I don't believe that for 1 second. And that's why I do not believe at all that Lukna Annie was his first kill. Now, could Lukna Annie be the first X on his aviation map? Probably on that kill map, but I don't know. I don't know about that. So the story of Lukna Annie, though, doesn't end in the mud of the swamp where Robert Hansen left her. Instead, it's at the Anchorage Memorial Park Cemetery, where her physical remains became a symbol of the women Alaska forgot and the secrets Hansen tried to keep. For over 45 years, the woman who sparked Hansen's sickness rested under a small bronze plaque that was slowly being reclaimed by the Alaskan sod. The marker offered no hint of the violence that ended her life or the monster who put her there. Still shrouded in anonymity, her marker says, Jane Doe, died 1980, which is just so sad. Lukna Annie's journey after death was as turbulent as her final moments. She was buried, then exhumed, and relocated 3 separate times. The last move was originally a matter of logistical necessity, and she had to be moved when her initial interment area was redesignated for infants. But she lies in a surprisingly beautiful, if hidden, corner of the cemetery tucked between 2 elegant headstones, shaded by a massive blue spruce and the scent of flowering lilacs. There is some irony that a woman who was brutally discarded in a mosquito-infested swamp now rests in a place of curated peace. And to the casual visitor, the plaque is just another record of a life lost. But to the true crime community and the troopers who never stopped working her case, that bronze plate represented the ultimate failure of Robert Hansen's game. He took her life and he took her name, and he even tried to take her humanity by calling her lower than himself. But by leaving her in that cemetery, the state of Alaska made a promise. They would not let her disappear. Even without a name, She was a permanent resident of Anchorage, a silent witness waiting for the technology of the future to finally give her back the identity Hansen stole in the mud of Eklutna. And as of today, of all the victims that they do know about, Alukna Annie is the only person that has yet to be identified. And they're still working on it. They do try very frequently for Eklutna. They did not forget about her. So at least they're doing that. Right, Amy? You know what I do when something makes me sick? I don't do it again. You don't do it 16 more times. Doesn't make sense. Now, as the interrogation clock clicked over to 12:19 p.m., the atmosphere in the room shifted. Robert Hansen moved from the mistakes of Eklutna Annie to the more calculated, yet still chaotic, murder of Sherry Morrow in November 1981. The case would prove to be a turning point that transformed the butcher baker into an aerial predator. Now, unfortunately, we could not find much from his confession about what happened during the murder of Sherry Morrow. But remember, excuse me, it was the condition of her body that revealed a level of postmortem ritual that chilled the investigators. When her remains were found, her head was wrapped in ace bandages, serving as a makeshift blindfold. She had been shot 3 times in the back, and although Sherry was found fully clothed, there were no bullet holes in her clothes, meaning that she had to have been redressed in some way. Now, Sherry's boyfriend, a man named Jankowski, no, I don't think that's right, probably Jankowski, I bet is it. Sorry, I should have looked that up. Sorry, Jan. Had told Sergeant Hogsfin that Sherry never took off a specific gold necklace with a gold arrowhead pendant. When the grave was excavated, the necklace was missing. But when the troopers tore apart Hansen's attic, it was sitting alongside jewelry from the other missing women. Then, in an unexpected quip that confirmed investigators' suspicions, Hansen offhandedly mentioned that the area was essentially his own private cemetery. He told them that another unidentified body remained buried just a few yards away from where Sherry had been found. Can you believe that? It's real close to, it's like, it's not that far, but they didn't see it when Sherry was found. And Hansen wasn't just dropping bodies at random. He was returning to specific sweet spots where he felt safe, comfortable, and invisible. So a whole lot of premeditating going on for somebody that just gets sick when something bad happens. Now, for the families of the missing women, this part of the confession was a bit of a double-edged sword. It offered the hope of recovery, but also reinforced the horror that their loved ones might be lying in a cluster, discarded like trash by a man who couldn't even remember their names. There was another interesting anecdote that we found from his confession. So Hansen's decision to stop using his pickup truck and switch exclusively to his private plane wasn't born out of a desire for adventure. It was allegedly, born out of terror. Again, we can only take some of his word to be true or half true. After burying Sherry Morrow, Hansen attempted to drive out of the remote area, but found himself trapped again. The same man who would calmly redress a corpse was suddenly reduced to a blind panic by a muddy road. Quote, "This time I wasn't thinking at all, and for some reason I was so much in a panic I started turning the wrong way and I stopped. Then I couldn't get the damn thing going again, so it took me some rocking back and forth before I got it out where there's some hard gravel. Coming through the road just before that, I had banged my back fender and got stuck once on the road that I had been going 20 times, my God, get the hell out of there, How do you go and say that after you just talked about murdering somebody? Like, whoa, Let's just casually talk about my car getting stuck. Now, this misadventure was the catalyst, he says. Hansen realized that the roads of Alaska were witnesses he couldn't control. A stuck truck meant a potential police encounter. And from that moment on, the Piper Super Club became his primary weapon. And so, in the winter of 82 and 83, Angela Fettern, Teresa Watson, and Delynn Frey were believed to be the first 3 women that Hansen flew into the bush in his Super Cub. And by flying his victims into the trackless wilderness, he eliminated the risk of getting stuck in the mud, and he could land on a gravel bar, commit his atrocity, and be back at the bakery before the dough had risen. Now, I have some questions about this area of his confession too. I have 2 things to say. The first is, as we're doing all of these confessions, we don't have the answers for how everyone was murdered. But I think that if you take all of what we do know together, we pretty much probably know what went down for what horrifying things went down for each of these women. But this is not the first plane he owned. He owned 2 before that. So for people that lie a lot, they'll have, an actual truth. Well, yeah, this was the first time I ever flew. It was this incident that I flew these other women out in this plane. But I'm not going to mention my other planes that I might have done that as well. Because he's been doing this for how long now? And at this point, he was like, oh, the roads are bad. Man, even though we heard survivor stories where he got stuck when he had abducted Patty. I mean, the roads in Alaska weren't great in the 70s and 80s. I doubt they're great now. And this is just now a worry of his. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense to me. But he's probably going to be like, please don't go look at my other planes and the flight records from those or anything of that nature. So. Yes, Pam. Pam says the final disrespect to the victims is that he couldn't even remember names. Yeah, I hate this guy. I mean, I hate a lot of the people we talk about, but this guy is just such a little, makes me angry. Amy says, I would say they probably did look, but it was Alaska. That, in fairness, he's confessing now for this plea deal, but it's only been a few months since his arrest because he was going to not waive his right to a speedy trial. If this would have gone on for years, I do think that we would probably have uncovered more in his case, but here we are. And that's another reason why I think he took the plea deal, is so more things wouldn't be investigated and more atrocities wouldn't be found out. Even though you would think, why would it even matter at that point? You've already admitted to killing, 16, 17 women. What's the matter if there's more, But this guy was very caught up in what people had thought of him. So that's that's just my opinion of how this all played out, or why it could have. So Amy says, well, because I don't think all of his victims were proved. Exactly. I agree. So after that, Hansen then goes on to explain in a general sense of what allegedly went down once a woman got into his vehicle. Excuse me, sorry. While we don't have his confessions, like I said, for each and every murder, it's more than reasonable that all of them experienced something similar to this, as it does match other survivor accounts. And just like when he's like, oh, I didn't bring a gun out on Cindy until we were at my house. Well, Susan Hepburn, Patty Roberts, Christy Hayes, and Jane Doe schoolteacher all have the same story, and those were years apart. And that's exactly what you do, sir. So, okay. So he says, okay. So we're going to be doing a back and forth interview here with Robert and Rothschild. So Robert says, I had planned on possibly that there was a better way to do it by using my airplane, but I didn't know how to get the people from my home to the airplane. I didn't like, there were times when I get up here along the Nick River and so forth, wasn't hardly a time when I was there that there wasn't other people driving up and down the road. And this was always a very scary situation. I was always concerned about that. No, he wasn't. If, while the girl was there, everything may go just as it was supposed to go, but what if she's seen somebody coming close by or something or the other and then start yelling or screaming or something like this here? This guy here has got me out here. He's kidnapped me and so forth. Oh my gosh. Rothschild says, what was your plan if that happened? Did you have a plan? Well, that just scared the living daylights out of me. I didn't know what to do. Now, that's why the only thing I could think of is just jump in the airplane and just leave and get the hell out of there as fast as I could. Hope to hell that they would not have got the numbers off my airplane. I know that once that happened, I was in a tremendous amount of trouble. Oh, did you know that? Okay. So Rothschild says, what I'm wondering, though, is you even mentioned that when things didn't go right out here, you felt like you were right out in the middle for the whole world to see. And then down here by Seaward, where you were just at a pull off along the road where there were mounds of gravel, and you were certainly, I'm sure, going as quick as you could. Here we are in Seaward again. Robert says, what I was going to do if something came up, sir, I honestly don't know about that one. I hadn't gone out planned to start shooting a bunch of people if a bunch of people showed up. No, I don't want to shoot anybody. It wasn't the plan at all. Sure, Jan, sure. But Cindy Paulson mentioned to us that you said to her something like, if we get stopped by anybody or troopers come or anything like that, oh, that was just talk. That was just talk to get her as scared as possible. The more scared she was, the better. I think there was something like that said every time someone was put out. That was just talk. It's just talk, you guys. Just him being a silly goose, that's all. Now, what was your standard speech? I know, right? It is a bunch of bullshit. What was your standard speech? Would you normally try to tell them to convince them not to? Oh, boy. I tried to stop, but most generally coming out of town, pull on to Muldoon Road, right down here a ways is, I don't know if it's an old fire station or if it's a state shed or something now in here. They generally have a big mound of gravel here. Look at all this gravel talk. And I remind you all of Beth Van Hansen. Or I'm sorry, not Beth Van Hansen, of ZZ Mason, who they tried to put it on Gary Zeiger. And this man, Hansen, goes to a lot of gravel pits to dispose of his victims. Just see, can all go back to that and be like, ooh, that is interesting. Oh, he continues on with, there's also an apartment building here and some homes along here, some more apartment buildings. There's one big apartment building down there. You can drive into the parking lot here, then more parking lots in between two of the big apartment buildings. Pull in here and just stop there. Or I pull into the parking lot here between the apartment buildings down here. A lot of just wasting our time, Hansen. Well, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I've used them both. Sorry, I just had to say it that way. Just stop there so the car's not moving, so I don't have to worry about her and the car both at one time. The car stops at the side of the road. Then try to control the situation from there. Is that when you pull out the gun? Yeah, I pull out the gun then. Oh, really? You pull out the gun then? Okay. Okay, but you didn't do that with Cindy. That's right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I pull out the gun then and say, hey, look now. You're, I think the standard speech was, look, you're a professional and don't get excited. You know there is some risk in what you've been doing. If you do exactly what I tell you, you're not going to get hurt. You're just going to count this off as a bad experience and be a little more careful next time who you are going to proposition or go out with. You know, this mofo. Mm-mm-mm. I try to act tough as I could to get them as scared as possible. Give that right away, even before I started talking and all that. Reach over, and more or less get my hand in the girl's hair, and hold that head back and put a gun in her face and get him to feel helpless and scared right there. Then tell them to turn around and face the seat on their knees on the floorboard. That way they were down. They wouldn't start anything there. I'm sure maybe it's not the same procedure for you, always trying to get control of the situation. So some things don't start going bad. Can you believe this guy at all? He now says, "Oh, you cops, you probably like do the same thing, right?" But also remember, he's a nice guy. Things only go bad if somebody tries to run away or cause a problem. He doesn't hold guns up against women. Okay, he's not like that. And here he's literally saying, "Yep, that's what I do every time." Mm. So that sounds like you had a good way to work it. Now, that's maybe I've seen some cops and cop shows and TV. I don't know. Well, how would you usually bind people? You wouldn't have their arms free. No, no, generally handcuffs. That's the easiest, simplest, but put their hands behind them when they were sitting on their knees on the floor with their hands behind them. And also, they were down when I drove by. Nobody could see them. And then, once down like that, then give them a speech that, try to impress on them over and over again if there was no problem whatsoever, that if they didn't do anything foolish, tomorrow they could get on and get the shit out of here or just not do it anymore. I hate this guy. Yeah, I'm just going to say I hate this guy after I have to say his words. So it's extra gross. Did you have to bind their feet too? No, I don't recall at this time ever tying anybody's feet up. No. I almost always got them on the floorboard of the car, mainly to, I know an awful lot of people around town and this and that. And I just didn't want the idea that possibly maybe taking any more chances that somebody knows my car and sees me driving. Did you ever have anything go wrong out there? I mean, just go batshit on you? Were you able always to control the situation? I never had a time to where when things went bad there. I never had a girl. The only time you could say it went halfway bad was if I had a couple of them start crying and start out, "Oh, don't kill me. Don't kill me. I haven't done anything." I tried everything I can think of that they know that's not going to happen and just do exactly what I tell you. I'm not going to hurt you. I never hurt none of them if the things went right. I admit I scared the hell out of them, but that's what I was trying to do. That's just what he was trying to do, guys, okay? Not a murderer, not a bad guy. That's just what he was trying to do. Well, from here, of course, there were no stoplights either, so you could go right back. I could just go. I had to make a stop, of course, you know that, but once that happened, I purposely drove 10 miles an hour slower than the speed limit any place I had to go. And that's one thing that really petrified me, that by God, something would go wrong or something. Oh, well, can't be having any of that, can you? Before I would go pick a girl up, I would check my car over from one end to the other. I was always petrified that something was going to happen to the car, and for some reason or another, I was going to have a mechanical failure, that I was going to be forced to stop along the side of the road. And then what the hell would I do? I'd do everything I could think of so I didn't have a problem. Well, look at him, just thinking of all of the things that could go wrong. Right, Pam? Oh, is that all? Well, shoot, I'm a swell guy. I'm a Midwestern guy with a stutter, and I'm a little Mick Baker. You know, I'm just trying to have some fun. Well, I scare the shit out of them. But then, you guys, if they react poorly, it's on them. Remember that. It's not his fault if they try to, like, I don't know, fucking survive and run away and get from his crazy ass. But boy, does he love putting the blame on these women, I'll tell you what. So as the interrogation moved into the afternoon, Robert Hansen turned his focus to the coast. On May 19th, 1980, while the rest of the world was reeling from the eruption of Mount St. Helens, Hansen was in Seward, Alaska, stalking 24-year-old Joanna Messina. Hansen's confession regarding Joanna was steeped in his characteristic delusion, okay? He told investigators he met her on the Seward docks and believed they were having a normal date. He was convinced she was attracted to him just for him, giving him a rare moment of validation for a man who spent his life feeling socially inferior. They went out to dinner, and the evening seemed to go well. Joanna, who had a job call at the cannery the following morning, simply needed to get back to her campsite. But for Hansen, the date was a trap that hadn't yet been sprung. Now, the transition from a romantic evening to a murder occurred in, have you guessed it, a gravel pit. What? Another one? Crazy. According to Hansen, after they arrived to have sex, Joanna asked for money. In Hansen's fractured moral universe, this request was a transformative event. The respectable woman he was dating instantly became a prostitute in his mind. He refused to pay, but he also refused to let her go. And the rejection sent him into a rage. He kidnapped Joanna and her dog, driving them to a remote area by the Snow River. Now, again, I think when it comes to this story, I mean, we heard his, with Patty, with Susan, with Christy. He would always be like, I thought it was it wasn't anything bad. It was all their fault. They tried to pull one over on me and ask for more money, blah, 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 blah. And I do feel that's exactly what he's doing with Joanna here. Like, oh, I thought we were on a date, like, oh, no, I don't believe that for 1 second. What followed was a brutal display of his control pathology. After raping her, Hansen's violence escalated beyond his typical methodology. He struck Joanna in the head with a .22 caliber revolver, using it as a club before using it to kill her. And he shot Joanna twice. In an act of senseless cruelty, he also shot her dog once, ensuring that there was no living witnesses to the crime. And it's of my personal opinion that he actually shot the dog first, because it was a German Shepherd. When we covered her missing case and finding of her body a few episodes ago, they were inseparable. And I don't see how you're going to be able to do all this and her dog just be like not reacting, because that's not what people said about her dog. Excuse me. So he dragged her body then across the gravel and stuffed her into a sleeping bag like some grim cocoon and dumped her in a gravel pit. Threw her belongings and dead dog into the woods and tossed the murder weapon into the Snow River. Hansen went on to say there was only one other time it went bad. That one. I've had an awful lot of second thoughts about that. So this is him saying, yeah, oh, maybe I was the bad guy in that situation. Maybe, I shouldn't have. That's why I think his story of what happens bullshit. Because he was just using that to try to make her look bad, to justify. And if that was the case, then why would you feel bad? And to say, oh, it only went bad one other time. Sir, we got a lot of X's on this map. So I don't know about that. Oh, you think he shot the dog first too? Yeah, I do. I do as well. Or maybe she left the dog back at the campsite or something. I don't know. But the dog had to have gone first or been chained up or something. Just based on what everyone said her dog was. Like, it was a good boy. It was a good boy dog. So by saying that he had second thoughts, he was trying to suggest that her death was a tragic misunderstanding rather than a calculated execution. He blamed her desperation for the money, effectively making the victim responsible for her own murder. And it was just more of the butcher's guile, a predator trying to frame his most violent outbursts as moments of personal regret. Get out of here, sir. Now, by the time the tape recorders were clicked off for the day, the investigators and district attorneys were emotionally spent. Lord knows I was writing all of this. But as Sergeant Flothy and DA Rothschild stepped out into the cold Alaskan night, they knew Hansen wasn't anywhere close to being honest with them, and that the next morning they were going to have to push, and push hard, because he was not being very honest about a lot of things. I think he is honest of like how he ended up killing them, but then he changes all the other stuff because I don't know. Do you think maybe it's because like he doesn't want to see himself as a monster, even though he knows he is a monster? Because he's monstrous. Let me tell you what. But do you notice how, like, in the first day, his story keeps changing? Oh, Cindy? No, I never pull guns out on people like that. Oh, Iklukna Annie? I told her not to run, and then she pulled a knife on me, and as though he's, like, claiming self-defense when she's face down on the ground, and he stabs her in the back. Anyway, he's so full of shit, this guy. So the investigators and district attorneys started the next day facing a vexing axiom, okay? When a serial killer tells the truth 20% of the time and lies the other 80%, the entire confession becomes a minefield. Because you cannot trust the truth because you have no metric to separate it from the trap. And I feel like he was only 20% telling the truth on a lot of these. So DAs Vic Crum and Frank Rothschild realized that Hansen was only giving up what he knew they already had. The survivors who could testify, like Cindy Paulson, and the bodies that had already recovered. He was trying to win the confession by keeping the rest of his secrets buried. So Crum decided to stop the polite inquiries and go for the jugular, or in real world terms. How did that go? Oh, never mind. I was going to have a clever joke, but then I forgot how I had the motto for the real world. Stop being nice and start getting real. That's what it is. The real world, where people stop playing nice and start getting real. Sorry. I have to do something to lighten this horribleness. So Crum laid out the mathematical impossibility of Hansen's story. Hansen had previously claimed there were 21 good times, consensual encounters that correlated with the marks on his flight map. That's right. Those were all good times, guys. They weren't bad times. Doesn't make sense. But Crum dismantled this lie. On the maps, there were 21 asterisks, and 5 of those marks already represented confirmed bad times. If Hansen was now claiming those specific spots only held bodies and no good memories, the math wasn't Mathing. It suggested then that every single one of those 21 marks was a grave. Look at all those numbers on that map. Like that is, and those are the ones that we know of. And I'm going to go with there's a lot more that's not on that map. So Crum issued a terrifying ultimatum to the man sitting across from him. He made it clear that while the state would honor the no publicity agreement for the Monday court date, the search wouldn't stop there. Quote, come springtime, we're not going to let this sit. We're going to go out there and we're going to be looking for 16 more graves. And the message was clear. We know the scale of what you did. If you don't tell us where they are now, we'll find them ourselves. And your deal will turn into a relentless series of new murder trials every time a shovel hits a bone, which is exactly what he did not want. And guess what? The pressure worked. Hansen began to twist nervously. His carefully constructed mask of the cooperative witness was slipping. And so he demanded a private break with his attorneys, Fred Dewey and Joe Evans. And what followed was a scene of pure chaos. You remember his lawyers believe in him? Well, from across the hallway, the prosecution team could hear muffled shouting and intense arguing. It became painfully obvious that Hansen hadn't just been lying to the police. He had been lying to his own defense team. Dewey and Evans, who had walked in believing they were managing a controlled surrender for, 4 or 5 murders, suddenly realized they were representing the architect of a literal graveyard. They hadn't read the FBI memo on the manipulative nature of serial killers, but they were getting a live demonstration of it now. Yeah, could you imagine? You're like, wait, what? Sir, there's how many other bodies out? What? Oh, boy, I bet they were pissed. I bet they were really pissed. I would be. Because, when you're negotiating a plea deal, there's... Now, Hansen began with Paula Goulding, the most recent found victim, who went missing in April of 1983, sometime during the last shift at the Bush, the dancing company. On April 25th, Hansen appeared and made an offer Goulding should have refused, but she was new to the game, and Robert Hansen took advantage of her inexperience. So let's listen to Robert talk about it. That's right. Let's hear his stupid voice. I hate his voice. Next, Amy. There you go.
So what's the plan to get them to the plane and get them in the plane?
Just scare the living shit out of them. Really bad, just tell them out and out, hey, if anything starts to go wrong, I'm going to probably have to shoot half the people in this damn town,
Ugh. You sound ridiculous. All right, and then we have another audio. This is where he's talking about Paula.
I walked around her side of the car, opened her door, and got her up and turned around up on the seat, and back around behind the wing strut, and she's still handcuffed behind on. Grab her by the arms and let her put her feet up on the step and walk up her feet on in, and she sits down. Once she's inside, now again she's pretty much confined, can't move. Then again, there's a period there where I have to go back out and get in my car and just move it 15 feet. And I tell her what I'm going to do. That's something I'm going to be watching it. You start getting out of the airplane, please don't do it because I don't want a bunch of holes in the side of my airplane where I have to shoot you through the side of the airplane. I said something to that effect to them. And she and the other two were, just sat there bored, didn't even blink an eye. And I got back in and started the airplane up and taxied out. Of course,
Isn't his voice just stupid? I find it stupid. I hate his stupid voice and I hate him. And just how he talks like so nonchalantly about everything. It's so eerie. I don't like it. And there were other audio things, but honestly, what we had access to wasn't of anything of importance. And boy, is he a slow talker. I was like, never mind. We don't need to listen. That was the only important stuff to take away. He sounds stupid. He is stupid. Hate this guy. Now, one of the most haunting aspects of the case, was how Hansen managed to load terrified women into his plane at Merrill Field, one of the busiest general aviation airports in the world. When Crum pushed him on how he kept them from screaming for help while surrounded by other pilots and ground crew, Hansen's answer was that it just never happened. And so this suggests a terrifying level of psychological dominance here, because by the time they reached the tarmac, his victims were often so traumatized or so convinced by his lies that they wouldn't get hurt if they cooperated, that they stayed silent in the shadow of the very people who could have saved them. And listen, that's no fault on the one. This happens all the time. One, nobody knows how they're going to react. And yeah, you want to hope that they're not going to kill you. But listen, they always say if somebody does try to take you to a secondary location, they are going to kill you. So don't go. But then again, when you're standing there in that moment out of nowhere, a person pulls a gun on you, it's probably the last thing that you remember. But I mean, somebody's waving around, they're talking about how they'll shoot other people. You know, he puts the possibility of other people's deaths on to the victim. Ugh, this fucking guy. I hate him. Now, Floppy asked the question some of you may be wondering. How does a lone pilot control a victim in the cramped, noisy confines of a small aircraft? Well, Hansen confirmed that the women were handcuffed in the back of the plane. You remember when him and one of his stupid alibi friends, okay, thanks, James. And they were like redoing his airplane seats to be removed out of the plane. Well, there you go. Now we know why, right? Ooh, don't like it. So once the Piper Super Club was in the air, Hansen felt invincible. To him, the cockpit was a soundproof vault. And he said, quote, "I don't care if they screamed, yelled, or fussed," he said. What the hell could they do? And that's true. What are they going to do? Wreck the plane with both of them in there? I mean, I guess let's take it down together, but, he's not wrong. And, he noted it with a predator's logic that there were no flight controls in the rear of the aircraft. And even if the victim broke free, they were trapped in a plane thousands of feet above the wilderness. What were they going to do? Now, Hansen denied the more cinematic villain tropes, like threatening to throw women out of the plane mid-flight. He pointed out the physical impossibility of it. It's not even possible for him to do. However, he admitted to a much more grounded and effective threat once they landed in the bush. And that was, if things don't go right, boy, this is where you're going to stay. Now, miles and miles from civilization, surrounded by bears that will eat you, wolves that will also eat you, and weather that most certainly will kill you, telling a woman this is where you're going to stay was not just a threat or of abandonment. No, it was a promise of death. You're not coming back from that with where he took them. There was no way of surviving that. Now, throughout these confessions, Hansen's focus remained entirely on his own convenience. He used the word problems repeatedly. To him, a kidnapping and a murder were talks that needed to be completed efficiently. All right, so the handcuffs, the threats, and the remote landing strips were all just tools to ensure that his project went smoothly. That's all. He wasn't interested in their fear for its own sake. No, He just wanted their compliance so he could satisfy his urges without problems. Sure. No, he enjoyed the fear. He enjoyed it. Now, the interrogation then took a cinematic turn as Robert Hansen began to describe the mechanics of the 1983 hunt of Paula Goulding. His account was devoid of empathy, focusing instead on the logistics of the terrain and the structural details of a hunter's camp. And there was a lot that I could have done like a back and forth in, but it was so, when people spend too much time on details that don't matter, this is what he was doing. And I'm like, I don't care if there were 5 leaves. I don't care. So I just skipped that part. But, well, I should say I put it into a small section for you guys. So Hansen described landing the Piper's Super Club on a firm gravel bar along the Nick River. He told them about the physical struggle of managing a captive in a cramped bush plane, the difficulty of extracting a handcuffed woman from the rear seat forced her to get loose so she could use the window supports to climb down. But the moment her feet hit the gravel, the transition from pilot to predator was complete. He grabbed her the second she'd stepped out, immediately asserting physical dominance in the middle of the Alaska void. And again, this is what he has to say about what happened to Paula, and it's probably what happened to many of the other ones as well. So just keep that in mind. Now, Hansen's memory of the location was disturbingly precise. Oh, this is the part I was talking about. And described a very specific campsite that evolved over time. There was a tent frame, a structure with half walls that had recently been enclosed. And not far from that was a meat shack, a screened-in building that he specifically noted the horizontal bar used for hanging carcasses. Which is a rather chilling detail, considering he had brought a human being to the same spot. But remember, guys, she's supposed to remain chill, believe him that he's not going to do anything wrong while going to a meat shack. Okay. He noted that the area was accessible by riverboat or high clearance 4x4s, but he felt safe there because he had seen the tire tracks of planes. With the engine turned off and the silence of the wilderness surrounding them, Hansen began leading Paula towards the shack. He used his standard psychological manipulation, telling her, quote, "This is where we're going to spend the day." It was a phrase designed to suggest a temporary situation, a way to keep his victim from panicking and causing problems before he was ready to exert final control. Now, just as they were walking towards the shelter, the one thing Hansen feared most happened: the unexpected arrival of another human being. A plane appeared from up the river, circling low over the gravel bar. Oh, shit! This son of a bitch was going to stop. Now, in that moment, Hansen felt a surge of blind panic, similar to the time his truck got stuck after murdering Sherry Morrow. The presence of another pilot wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat to his carefully constructed anonymity. He stood there, holding Paula by the arm, watching a plane circle the very spot where he intended to commit murder, realizing that for all his planning, the Alaskan wilderness was never truly empty. So Hansen's strategy with Paula was to turn her own survival instincts against her. By the time they reached the Nick River meat shack, he had successfully framed his potential for murder as her personal responsibility. Quote, "If something goes wrong up here, it's going to be your fault." Which he said that to some of the survivors, like Patty. When the unexpected plane began circling overhead, Hansen didn't just see himself as a kidnapper caught in the act. No, he saw himself as a man whose peace had been disturbed. How dare they? He used the pilot's presence as a terrifying leverage point that if Paula screamed and forced him to kill the pilot, he would have to kill her too. And in Hansen's twisted math, her silence wasn't just a demand, it was a favor he was allowing her to do for herself. Isn't he just so thoughtful and so nice? Now, the details of the meat shack proved a very haunting backdrop to this atrocity. Hansen described the nail and the stud used to keep the screen door shut, and probably a mundane detail of Alaskan bush life that he twisted to secure his prison. That's right, secured her with one nail. Now, inside the shack, he had backed Paula against one of the structural supports. The iron bar, designed for hanging heavy moose carcasses, became the anchor for her handcuffs. And then he told her he was going to make sure the guy didn't land, maintaining the illusion that if she would just stay quiet, the problems would end. Now, while Paula was chained to a meat post inside the shack, Hansen walked back out to his Super Cub. As the pilot overhead made a final pass and dipped his wings in a friendly hello between fellow aviators, Hansen stood on the gravel and waved back. To the pilot in the sky, it was a peaceful scene of a lone hunter at a camp. To Hansen, it was a moment of narrow escape that triggered a surge of adrenaline. The wave wasn't a sign of relief. It was a trigger for escalation, because shaken by the close call, Hansen realized his pistol wasn't enough to maintain the control he craved. So he reached into the Super Cub and pulled out his .223 Ruger Mini 14, the high-powered semi-automatic rifle that would eventually become the forensic signature of his most brutal kills. He leaned the rifle against the meat shack, a silent centennial of the violence to come, and stepped back inside to face Paula. The game had been interrupted, and Romper Hansen was finished being patient. During his confession, Hansen took a twisted pride in how well he had groomed Paula for her own abduction. He described her as almost an accomplice in her own kidnapping, running to the plane to be quiet, offering to duck down at Merrill Field to avoid being seen, and hiding in the bushes when the witness's plane first appeared. Now, to Hansen, this wasn't the behavior of a woman paralyzed by a gun and a madman. It was a partnership in avoiding problems. Well, quote, she'd done everything in her possible at the time to keep there from being a problem. I think I had her convinced of this. Ugh. Now, the psychological break happened at the threshold of the meat cooling shack. Hansen, always the analytical hunter, wondered aloud during his confession if the mere name of the structure, a place built specifically for the butchering and hanging of carcasses, is what finally broke Paula's facade of hope. I mean, it probably would me. I'm sorry, but I don't think if somebody has me chained to a bar in a meat shack that I'm coming out alive of this. All right. Plus, this guy has already said that he killed freaking anybody else. So again, she knows. She knows. They all know. He likes to think that they're ignorant, and they're not. We all know they're not. That's why when he was like, oh, these are only the ones that fought back or tried to run away. I'm going to go with a lot of them did, sir. All right. You don't just all of a sudden have 16 women do that in a row in 3 years, but none in the previous 10 years. Okay. Okay, sir. Now, when he returned to the shack after waving at the pilot, the dynamic had shifted. The girl who had run to the airplane to get in quiet was gone, replaced by a human being who stared into the void and saw her own end. The moment he freed her from the iron meat pipe, the screams began. Paula Goulding had stopped believing the meat baker's lies. Quote, "You're going to kill me, aren't you? You're going to kill me. Hansen, with his rifle leaning against the exterior wall, replied, No, I ain't going to kill you. The problem is over with. Now, Hansen described her as beyond fright and unconsolable. You don't say. Like a real fucking human being, Robert. For a man who obsessed over control, her loss of composure was the ultimate problem. He could no longer pretend this was a day out or a sincere attachment, and by realizing her imminent demise, Paula Golding had stripped away Hansen's last excuse. As the interrogation reached the climax of the Paula Golding narrative, the room fell into a heavy silence. Robert Hansen began describing a frantic, one-sided hunt in the Alaska bush. His words revealed a terrifying logic under where the murder was a tragedy that happened to him rather than an atrocity that he committed because, of course. Hansen described the final minutes as a series of failed attempts to calm a woman who had correctly identified her own executioner. Paula's transition from compliant to hysterical was, in Hansen's eyes, the primary problem. I just don't understand why you don't calm down while I'm pointing a gun at you and have you handcuffed. I don't understand why you're freaking out. Like, no, you do. When she finally broke away towards the river, he caught her and tried to gaslight her one last time, claiming everything was cool. But the presence of the meat shack and the circling plane had stripped away the illusion. When she ran a second time, Hansen reached for the Ruger Mini 14 223 rifle he had leaned against the shack. Now, Hansen would never say, I killed her or I shot her. Instead, he used the phrase, things went completely bad. So just so you know, this mofo can take how many lives, but he can't even be a man to say, I killed her or I shot her. No, he's going to be a little wimpy, little wimp, and he can't even say the own words of what he did. No, it's just things went bad. I don't know. Disgusting. Now, to Hansen, Paula's attempt to run was a betrayal of the deal he thought they had. He blamed the son of a bitch pilot for circling. In his mind, the witness caused the panic. The panic caused the run, and the run forced the shooting. That's right. It's nothing to do with him. It's not his fault, guys. It's fine. It's everybody else. Now, the analysis of the moment, I think, is vital to understanding Hansen. When a woman ran, she was reclaiming her agency, okay? And she was proving that he didn't have control. And he didn't like that, all right? Because to Robert Hansen, that was the ultimate insult. And his anger knew no bounds because her flight was a mirror reflecting his own inadequacy. And maybe if he hadn't been such a creepy little jerk, okay, women might have actually talked to you. But no, you're a fucking creep. And a weirdo and gross. And you're going to blame all the women for you being that way when you're the problem. Okay, sir, are the problem. Now, when he couldn't control her life, he would exert the only power he had left, and that was to control her death. Now, the interrogation then turned to a specific haunting detail that had puzzled the recovery team when they first unearthed Paula Golding's remains. Sergeant Glenn Flothy knew there was a discrepancy in how she was found, and he used it to test the accuracy of Hansen's memory. Now, Flothy asked about the state of Paula's clothing. Hansen's response was a frantic, sensory memory of the final struggle. He recalled the moment his control physically tore her world apart as she tried to flee towards the river. Hansen lunged, grabbing the back of her shirt with such force that it ripped at least partway off. In a display of his bizarre personality, Hansen claimed that as she stumbled to her knees, terrified and screaming that he was going to kill her, because he's a great guy, guys, he actually apologized for the damage, saying, "I'm sorry that I tore your clothes." Can you believe this guy saying this to the police with a straight face? Like, listen, I know I've done all this stuff, which doesn't sound great, but I am still a nice guy. I have manners. I'm from the Midwest, so I had to apologize for ripping her clothes, even though I'm literally about to murder her. Sure, that doesn't make any sense, Robert. Now, he admitted that by the time the final struggle ended, her clothes were hanging off her shoulders, buttons were missing, and the fabric was shredded, a forensic detail that matched exactly what the troopers had seen in the dirt of the nick. When the questioning shifted to the actual execution, Hansen's narrative became fragmented because, of course, it did. He described the use of the Ruger Mini 14 not as a precision hunting tool, but as a panicked extension of his own rage. Because the rifle was an automatic, the shots fired in rather rapid succession to a degree. And Hansen claimed he couldn't remember the count once, twice, 3 times, doesn't know, describing a chaotic scene where he held the rifle like a pistol at close range. Again, experienced hunter, this guy. Like, you guys think that's how it went down? I don't. And he couldn't remember? Okay. Hansen did his best at minimizing every ounce of responsibility he could. Not for just Paula, but like with all of them. So that's why this is so frustrating. He wanted to maintain the image of a guy who was pushed into a situation where a gun just happened to go off, right? It just happened. I don't know. It happened like 17 times. God, it's crazy. But the ripped clothes and the multiple, the multiple 223 wounds told a different story. A story of a predator who hunted a woman until her spirit broke and then silenced her screams. Now, as the final tapes of his confessions slowed to a stop, the room was left with a silence that was both heavy and hollow. Robert Hansen had finally been unmasked. His meek Baker persona discarded for the reality of a systematic predator. Gosh, words are hard right now. Just kidding. But as the legal teams prepared for his sentencing just a few days later, the finality of his words felt like a jagged, incomplete edge, which is also how I feel about it as well. The official tally was staggering. 17 murdered women and the sexual assaults of at least 30 others during a 12-year reign of terror. That's what he admitted to. It meant that for Ekalutna Annie, Joanna Messina, Sherry Morrow, and Paula Goulding, the truth was finally etched into a court record. Yet the math of Hansen's map told a darker story. Of the suspected 37 victims, the remains of only 12 women have ever been recovered and returned to their families, who spent years staring at that front door, waiting for a daughter or a sister who would never walk through it. Now, while the plea deal was designed to clear the decks, Hansen proved that even a man facing 461 years plus life in prison could still hoard power and be the gatekeeper of grief. Now, the aviation map, once a tool for navigation, had been transformed into a permanent ledger of the missing. But it was an incomplete ledger. Hansen pointed to many X marks, but there were others he simply refused to explain, and some of those being 3 X's located near Resurrection Bay, a deep water fjord near Seaward. And we all know the stories of Megan Emmerich and Mary Phil. And by refusing to speak their names or confirm their locations, Hansen ensured that the families of those unrecovered victims would remain in a state of permanent, agonizing limbo. The map was a confession, but his silence on all the specific marks was a final act of defiance, a way to ensure that even from behind bars, he still held the keys to Alaska's darkest secrets. And just so you know, during, and we will talk about what happened to some of these other women in the next episode, and I didn't include the confession parts here. And that's because he didn't know a lot of the women's names. And they didn't know who a lot of the victims were until they found the bodies and could confirm who they were. So we'll get into some more of his confession in the next episode as well. And speaking of, next time, on our next episode, we reach the final chapter in our Frozen Fear, the Butcher Baker of Alaska series. That's right, we made it. I made my deadline to have it all wrapped up by the end of March. And we're going to take you inside the courtroom for a sentencing that remains one of the most significant in American history, where a judge handed down a staggering 461 years plus life, ensuring that Robert Hansen would never again breathe the air of the Alaskan wilderness. And then we'll fly with the troopers as they use Hansen's death maps to find the bodies he promised would never be found. The ice is melting and the truth is surfacing, and the families of the vanished are finally going to get their names back. And we're going to see the conclusions of what happened with Cindy Paulson, what happened with Darla and the kids, and how did the community really react to all of that. And we'll be covering all of that next time for our well-earned and deserved reckoning of Robert Hansen, the end. Now, I said a lot of my closing thoughts already in this. Thank you, Lainey. Lainey 100% shares my scorn and disgust. And yeah, I feel like I don't blame, believe it or not, I blame a lot of things in Alaska. I do. We all do at this point, after everything we've learned. I want to be upset that they didn't press harder in these interrogations of forcing him to tell the truth, because I don't believe he told the truth at all. And I don't feel like they really called him on his bullshit. And they were willing to just take the minimum amount of information they could and then go from there. And I don't entirely blame them, because in situations like these, you do have to be really careful, right? He could just not say anything and not cooperate. And they are looking at trying to find what they think is 21 missing and dead women. So I do give them grace when it comes to getting this confession out of him. But I really wish, because he never talked about this again. He didn't want to. And so there's so many unanswered questions that I do wish that they had pressed more on certain things, or that it would have been talked about. And you'll understand more. I mean, you probably already can understand why, but in the next episode, when we're left with what we do and what we don't know, because even though half of the stuff he says is lies to make himself look good, for some of the women, that's all the information we have on them. And so that's quite sad. But between all the stories we've heard in our entire coverage of this miniseries, all the way from Susan Hepburn to Cindy Paulson, if you combine all those stories together, we know what happened. I'm not saying we need like the details of what happened to each woman, but some more of who they were, like Eklutna Annie. There weren't more conversations. We don't know anything about her. And what about all the people he's not talking about? I mean, it does suck. There's so many unanswered questions. But what happened with Paula, it's probably what happened with all those other women as well. He tries to make himself be like, hey, listen, I was just kidnapping them. They were prostitutes. I was just trying to get it for free and scare them and all of this stuff, which for him to even... I know that he says that, oh, they're just prostitutes, so they're bad. And when at the beginning, right, he says, oh, I love all women. I fall in love with all of them. Do you? Because you got a weird way of showing it, sir. And are you in love with your wife? Because you're a pretty fucking shitty husband all around. Not just for this. I mean, this is pretty much the worst you can do, but like, you're not great, sir. His view of himself is entirely twisted. Lady in Gray says the judge also skewers the justice system for their failures. Yeah, I was hoping to put all of this finality in one episode, but unfortunately the sentencing part, it's not unfortunate because it's very, very good, but the sentencing part is about 7 or 8 pages long, and it feels very good. It is a good ending to that of recognizing the faults along the way and the atrocities that I have yet to be disappointed in any of the judges, except for the Alaskan Supreme Court. Not a fan of them. The judges, except for the judge who he had the bail hearing with for Patty. Remember, he was just like, well, it's Christmas. Like, I know he just kidnapped and raped a 17-year-old, but go spend Christmas with your family, even if another girl just was found dead 2 days before. It's Christmas. It's fine. He doesn't need to be in jail. That guy sucks. But anyway, that is what we will be talking about tomorrow. Yay. And so that's all I really have for tonight. I'll definitely have some more thoughts at the conclusion of tomorrow. If you guys have any questions, if you want, you can leave them in the comments, the chat, DM them, email them, leave them in Discord, wherever you want to. And I'd be happy to talk about them more after we finish it up tomorrow night. So if you have them, send them my way. And we can definitely discuss more because there's so much more to say. There's so much when it comes to this. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up tonight. So I have some voice left over for tomorrow night since I've been on twice today. So before we go, if you like what you've heard tonight, be sure to follow all of our socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. Or if you're listening to our pod, please download and give us a rating. All of that helps us tremendously in getting our channel out there, and it's free. So that's the best, right? Love free stuff. Now, as I said, tomorrow on True Crime and Wine Time, join us for the chilling conclusion of our Frozen in Fear, the Butcher Baker of Alaska series at 8 p.m. Eastern. Terry may or may not be with us, but I will be here for sure. And that's all I've really got for you guys. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, and until next time, go forth and be amazing. All right, bye.